White people. If crime statistics really mattered to us, we would be talking about white men every damn day. We as white people love to throw around statistics when it comes to the black community. We love to misconstrue data about poverty rates, crime rates, single parent households. Here's the thing, if you really want to talk about problematic behavior in terms of statistics, we need to talk about white men. Most mass shootings in America? White men. School shootings? White men. Intimate partner violence, typically known as domestic violence? White men. Police brutality and systemic violence? White men. Online harassment and extremism? White men. Domestic terrorism? White men. Serial killers? White men. The demographic making up the vast majority of CEOs, judges, senators, and police chiefs who refuse to hold white men responsible? White men. And yet us white men are really talked about as being a problem. Few white people are asking what's wrong with white men, what's wrong with the culture. Few white men are demanding that we be fixed. And why? Because we as white men humanize and individualize white violent offenders. And it's time to flip the script. To shame and blame, because I know white males are incredibly fragile when it comes to that, but instead to name what's really going on and who continues to be protected and not held accountable because of selective storytelling. I hope this helps.
I have looked, and you're right. It would make sense that white people commit more violent crimes, considering that we are close to 70% of the population, so therefore we should be committing about 70% of the crimes. About 13% of the population to 14% is black. Why is it that 13 to 14% is committing, as you put it, half of the murders?
White people can't gaslight me into thinking that black people are violent, when you have historically been the most violent across a whole nation. I'm not ever going to compare someone running in a corner store and robbing it because they live in a system inside of a neighborhood that you created so they fail, to you pulling out somebody's teeth and putting it in your mouth. Boiling babies, graping and unaliving people. If we're going to talk about violence, it starts with you. It will always start with you. I don't care about a carjacking. I don't care about a pew-pew. It starts with you. If we compare and contrast apples to oranges, you win every time at the most violent, vicious criminals. Without any without moral clause, morality, anything. Savages, I would say. Because I would never put nobody on a boat, stacked high, and make them work for me for free. While I grape their women, take off the sexual parts of their men, also grape their children and sell them. I would never. So when we talking about violence, talk about that.
Family, when you turn on the news, you think that crime has a color, and that color is black. But what if I told you that the numbers paint a completely different picture? Let's talk about who's really, committing the most crimes in America and why the truth rarely makes the headlines. Family, for the longest time, crime has been associated with black people. But family, in this video, you'll notice that has always been a lie. They've always painted blackness, and associated it to crime. But family, that is the biggest lie ever told in the history of America, because most of these crimes are committed by white people according to numbers. So family, in this video, we will debunk that fact. Fam, in a special way, I'd like to thank my subscribers who are supporting this channel by buying me a coffee. I do not take your support for granted. The link is on the description box down below. Let's watch the video, then we'll be right back.
I started this page about a year ago to relearn U.S. history because I thought I wasn't taught properly, and turns out I wasn't. And I have to tell you, there's no fucking way to both sides of this argument. There's no way. There's nothing comparable to the violence that white Americans have inflicted upon non-white Americans over the last 400 plus years. There's no way to compare it to anything else. And people always get up in my comments saying, any indigenous people also owned enslaved people. Did they? Did they before white folks showed up? You tell me, right? Our miscegenation laws were so complicated that the Nazis didn't even like them, right? And when we're talking about this white violence against non-white people, you can pinpoint almost any date in fucking history and you'll find something. Business being burnt down, someone being lynched, racial violence, sexual violence. Literally, the summer of 1919 starts because a man tripped and touched a white woman's ankle. A young black man tripped and touched a black woman's ankle. I'm not kidding, right? In the 20th century alone, we've got the summer of 1919, that's like 30 plus cities, that's Elaine, Arkansas, that's straight up massacres. There is so much violence and murder, and so few white people get held accountable, right? We can talk about Tulsa, we can talk about Rosewood, we can talk about so many fucking places. We can talk about the entire civil rights movement. People's homes, their businesses, their churches getting blown up for asking for rights that are afforded to them in the fucking Constitution. There is no both sidesing this. The violence in the United States comes from white Americans. And people leverage that violence to prove that they're white enough. They're white enough to join the in group, right? That's how immigrants ingratiated themselves into white American culture. They did a violence against non-whites, right? And white women don't want to have this conversation. They don't want to talk about how white women have upheld white supremacy. But realistically, when you're thinking about a white supremacist structure, if it only serves white men, it is not structurally sound. It would not stay in place. So white women add an extra layer of the foundation to hold this up. And they hold this up by heinous acts. They hold this up by calling the police in 2025, knowing that if they call the police on a young black man, he might fucking die. They hold this up with microaggressions in the office. They hold this up by lying and by doing everything it takes in their power to get to this white man, because that's where their perceived power comes from. And they'll forsake you too. I promise. It's not a comfortable conversation, but it needs to be had or we will not move forward.
It would make sense that white people commit more violent crimes.
Why does it make more sense that white people commit more violent crime than black people? Yes, they are 70% of the population, but I think the point that you're trying to make here is that somehow black people are more violent than white people because we have a smaller percentage of population. So let's say that it was completely equal then, and it was 50-50. Black people and white people, same amount of people. If two people were murdered, and one was a black person and one was a white person that committed them, who would be the most violent group then? Neither, because only two people were murdered, and one was committed by a white person, one was committed by a black person. So by your logic, what you're saying is that because one of the groups has a smaller number of people in them, that somehow makes them more violent. Why? Because even if there was 300 million white people and 2 black people, and 2 people committed a murder, 1 white person, 1 black person, by your logic, the black person would be more violent because they got a very small percentage of the population. How does that make sense? That doesn't make sense. That's just what white people do to make themselves feel better about their violence and what they do. It doesn't make sense.
So these racist motherfuckers and they false statistics. Well, here goes some statistics for your ass. And the sources go be underneath it. What that's right there. Total arrests. White, 69%. Black, 26%. And miss me with all that. Oh, it's per capita. First of all, it's an issue. Y'all ass is an issue. and they go to federal sentencing. So we are 13.4% more likely to get longer sentences than y'all. So not only is y'all committing most of the crime, y'all letting each other off. What's that? Likelihood of receiving probation. Black males is 23.4% less likely than white males. Y'all got it good. Y'all out here running amok, and y'all got it good. How you like them apples? So what's y'all excuse for this, man? Is this per capita? Y'all letting is this per? Because that's the only thing. Per capita. What about this? What about that? And the source is the FBI. So go on their website. You can find this.
Guess which race has the highest number of people in the USA? Guess which race commits most of the violent crimes in the USA? That is a lie, son. Look at this. I wish I could move. I need to move your comment. But where does it say violent crime? Violent crime. White people are at 209,000. This was in 2019. Meanwhile, black people are at 129,000. You're lying. And it's not okay. Like, that's not true. And the problem that I think a lot of people are having is the fact that what I said was true. And people keep trying to think about per capita. Quite frankly, the per capita amount does not matter to the topic that I'm speaking on, because I was talking about how the welfare queen and racist stereotypes are pushed about black people on government assistance. Meanwhile, the total amount of recipients on government assistance, when you take the total amount, white people are the majority of people getting government assistance. But y'all like people, not y'all, but people like to be racist towards black people and Hispanics, minorities, as if we are just snatching all of the government's money. Meanwhile, the majority race in America is at the top as the majority recipients. That's what I'm talking about. Like, y'all just keep lying and coming up with numbers that do not even exist and aren't true.
Y'all know the crazy thing? The ancestors of all these people behind this brother got black fatigue nowadays. So a common theme that they loved to do back in the day was take pictures with the people they were about to put up in the tree. And to make it worse, what they used to do after was like dismember, body parts. They'll probably take an arm or a finger or something and keep it as a souvenir. You got to think about the types of wickedness you got to have before completing an act like this. Like, you got to completely dehumanize them. And bro, you got to think about it. Like, this wasn't that long ago, probably less than 100 years old. Like, we got grandparents that was probably peers with this brother right here. Like, you know what I'm saying, y'all? They want us to always forget. We ain't forgetting shit. I don't care how uncomfortable it make it. But hey, black fatigue.
Black Americans are about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do. They commit more murders, they commit more arsons, they commit more kidnappings. For example, blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
Okay, let's talk about it. These are obviously racist claims, but I will respond to them as if Charlie Kirk were a reasonable person.
Black Americans are about 13 to 14% of the population.
Yes,
about half of all prisoners are black.
Wrong. Just 38% of America's prison population is black. That's according to the U.S. government. But it makes you wonder why Charlie feels the need to add an additional 12% to the black prison population. Could it be because his bigoted talking points only work if he exaggerates them? If Charlie were actually looking for the race that makes up half the prison population in the U.S., he'd look no further than white people at 57%.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes than whites do.
Wrong. The word "so" is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
Exactly.
So blacks commit more crimes.
He's saying "so" as in therefore, as in one could conclude, but Charlie knows he's lying. Even if he hadn't just lied about the black prison population, Charlie is smart enough to know that correlation does not equal causation, but he's hoping that you don't know that. So he deploys the word "so" to make you think he's coming to an obvious conclusion.
Exactly.
So blacks
Instead, he's making an illogical, racist leap. Charlie knows that we don't have usable data about who commits crimes. It's impossible to have that data since so many crimes go both unreported and or unsolved. Charlie knows that we only have data about arrests and convictions. I'll come back to that data in a moment. What's painfully obvious is that Charlie Kirk isn't interested in understanding the statistics he so carelessly misquotes. He's interested in making bad faith arguments. Something that becomes even more obvious in his next point.
blacks are 13% of the population and they commit 58% of all the murders.
Wrong again, and loud this time. If Charlie were interested in honesty, he would have mentioned the other 1350 statistic. Yes, black people are about 13% of the population, but make up 53% of all criminal exonerations. In fact, black people make up 55% of all murder exonerations specifically. Black people are more likely than any other group in this country to be convicted of crimes they did not commit. And then people like you have the nerve to parade these stats around as though they prove something. The reality is that you probably know these stats, but you leave them out on purpose, because to bring that stat into this conversation would make some people think. And that's the last thing a person like you wants.
Fam, for the longest time, the white supremacist has always associated crime, violence, and anything negative, to blackness. But family, this is something that they've been taking advantage of for the longest time. Many a times we do not get the real numbers. We are lied to paint a bad picture of black people. They've been looking for ways that they can ensure that they suppress our community, the community of people who look like me and you. Fam, now let's be real. Let us now talk about the real thing. For decades, the media, politicians have pushed the narrative that black and brown communities are the main source of crime in America. For the longest time, if you look at most of the news being reported, most of these cases have always been cases of black people. They tend not to report news of white on white violence. They do not want us to see the other side of them. They want us to think that the problem has always been amongst black people in America. But family, when you look at it deeper, you notice that that is because of them not reporting in media about the white on white violence. They do not want to report on the crime that white people are committing in America. We've seen mugshots of young black men on the evening news, while white suspects often get called troubled individuals or loners, but perception isn't reality. The numbers tell another story. According to FBI's, uniform crime reporting data and Bureau of Justice statistics, the majority of crimes in America are actually committed by white people. Family, that is something they do not want you to know. That is something that they've been hiding from us for the longest time. They do not want us to be aware of the truth. They want to paint a picture that black people are the problem in America. Well, in real sense, white folks are the problem. White folks commit the most crimes in America. They want to paint a different picture. Why are they doing this? Why? Simple math. White Americans make up the majority of the population. That's just mathematics in its simplest form. White Americans are responsible for the majority of arrests overall. Most of the times you'd hear a lot of people say that most arrests happening in America today, are those of black criminals. But family, that is a lie. I'd like to change that perception today and tell you that the most people being arrested today in America are actually white folks, not black people. This is something that they've been lying for the longest time. They lead in categories like property crimes, drug offenses, and even white-collar crimes, which often get swept under the rug. But because of racial bias in the media and justice system, crimes committed by white offenders are rarely framed, as part of a racial problem. When a black person commits a crime, it's treated as a reflection of the entire race. Many a times that's what they do. The other day we saw them. We even saw the Utah governor argue and say that he hopes the person who's murdered Charlie Kirk was not one of their own. They actually thought that the person was a lefty. They even thought that the person specifically was a black person. That was their prayer. They wanted him to be a black person, but that wasn't the case. Many a times when a black person commits a crime, it's treated as a reflection of the entire race, just like I have mentioned. And when a white person commits one, it's taken as an exemption. The question is, why do we keep feeding this double standard? Who benefits when people believe, who benefits when people believe black and brown communities are the most dangerous, even when the data says otherwise? Who benefits? You know, these are some of the questions you ask yourself. This isn't just about pointing fingers, you know, it's about how narratives shape policy. If white crime was reported the same way black crime is, we'd see more conversations about mental health, economic pressure, and accountability across all communities. Instead, systemic racism keeps shifting the blame while ignoring the root causes. You know, so next time someone says black people commit all the crimes, hit them with facts. You know, many a times people say baseless. You know, they do not have a base with their information. The next time somebody hits you by saying that black people are the majority when it comes to crime rates in America, hit them with facts. Tell them the truth. You know, tell them the numbers. Crime doesn't have a race, but the way America talks about it, it actually does. You know, and the most people who are committing the most crime, since they want us to put it on a race basis, are actually white folks. You know, what do you think, family? You know, is this just, you know, media bias or something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've learned something new, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Family, if you comment in this video, there'll be an interaction on the comment section, and the video will be recommended to more and more people. That would be the case if you also consider liking the video, and I'd really appreciate. Family, in a special way, I'd also request you that you do consider subscribing to the channel. We are currently on the road to 50,000 subscribers, and fam, I really depend on you, you know, to hit that subscribe button. Family, it's there for free. You're not being charged for you to subscribe to the channel. We are currently on the road to 50,000 subs. Fam, the goal of the channel has always been to talk about black stories the black way, ensure that we talk about black empowerment, the real black history. For the longest time, we've learned that if we give the white supremacists an opportunity to tell our stories, many a times they whitewash our stories. And that is the exact goal of this channel, to tell black stories the black way. Family, thank you so much. Kindly do consider subscribing to the channel, and see you all in our next episode. Goodbye for now.